Hi, I'm Don Sundman, and I want to talk about the 1 cent Z-Grill stamp, America's most valuable stamp. It's coming up at auction this June, and it's estimated that it will sell for between $3 and $5 million, and once again be America's most valuable postage stamp. I bought that stamp in 1998, and it was really exciting to buy and really exciting to own. I showed it at American Philatelic Society stamp shows and other events, and the collectors were so excited to see it. It was really a lot of fun. Well, in the 1960s, when I was looking at stamp catalogs and looking at prices, like everybody does, I noticed the 1 cent Z-Grill. And back in the 60s, it cataloged for $6,500, which isn't a lot of money today, but then it was an extraordinary high price. The stamp prices were much, much lower back then. And so then I just thought it was a curiosity. And then in the 1970s, I moved to Mystic, and I'm working at Mystic Stamp Company, and we had stamps. And again, I'm looking at the catalog, and I noticed that the 1 cent Z-Grill cataloged in 1973, $25,000. And again, that's a lot of money. So I went through all of our grilled stamps and ungrilled and trying to find grilled and see whether we had any of the scarce Z-Grill. I don't think I was aware that there are only two that had ever been identified, and they'd both been identified by the same collector around 1916 or 17. Grills are complicated and difficult to identify, and after a while I realized I just didn't know enough. And so I gave up the search because I didn't find a single Z-Grill. They're extremely rare. The 1 cent Z-Grill in around 1980 was bought by Jerry Buss, who was a collector in Los Angeles that owned some sports teams out there. And he paid $100,000 for it, which was just a crazy high price. I just couldn't believe it. It was really exciting. But it was a time when stamp prices were increasing, and it was always exciting to see that interest in the hobby, and that somebody from an outside field collector had that passion. And Buss had a great stamp and coin collection and had a lot of fun building it. So then in 1986, Buss decided to sell his stamps at auction, and he was auctioning them in California. And the 1 cent Z-Grill sold for $418,000. And a financier named Zollner bought that stamp, or through an agent bought the stamp. And I was in the East, and a friend of mine was at that auction in California, and he was so excited about it. He called me up in the middle of the night and woke me up to tell me the price. And I was excited too. It was really fun to hear that the stamp sold for that much money. So then years go by. I'd learned more about grills. I'd learned a lot more about stamps. And then in 1998, Mr. Zollner decided to auction off his collection. He had built the most complete collection of U.S. stamps that existed. And around that time, I had changed Mystic's tagline to America's leading stamp dealer. Previously, it was serving collectors since 1923. But we were America's leading stamp dealer, and I wanted collectors, to think of our company differently. We were, at that time, had become the biggest buyer of stamps and stamp collections directly from collectors, and the company was growing a lot. And I thought owning the 1 cent Z-Grill would make us unique. There's only one available to collectors. It's a big thing. A big story, and that we could show it off at stamp shows and collectors would enjoy seeing it, and that would be a lot of fun. So I started to learn more about the 1 cent Z-Grill because it's so much money. I wanted to feel confident that it was a genuine stamp and that it was a good decision to make. And I read some research that Ken Lawrence had done, which was really groundbreaking. Ken's a great student of stamps and a very knowledgeable person. And he traced the 1 cent Z-Grills back, that the two stamps that are known were both discovered by Stevenson, who's the student on grills and is the first person that realized that all grills weren't the same stamp. There were many different types of grills. as they refined the process. So Ken realized and proved that Stevenson had sold one of the 1-cent Z grills to Miller, which ended up in the famous Miller collection, now at the National Post Museum. For many years, it was at the New York Public Library. But they kept the second stamp and kept it until he died in 1958, I think, in Chicago. And then the stamp came on the market. And prior to Stevenson dying, the only known copy was in the Miller collection. Stevenson, in a McKeel's stamp article, had said that there were two known and he had seen them. He didn't say that they were both his at that time. So anyways, I felt really good about the stamp, and I decided to go to the auction and try to buy it. And so then it's like, what do you pay for it? Who knows? And there's a 10% buyer's commission at the time, I think, something like that. And so I worked it out. I thought that the company could afford and we could pay as much as $1.5 million for the stamp. I wanted to pay less, obviously, but I would go as high as that. And after that, I couldn't afford it. I couldn't do any more. So then in planning this, I also thought it would be fun to have my 11-year-old son, Zachary, go with me. And he could bid on the stamp, and it would give him like a thrill and make a fun story for collectors. We all love our stories. So the day before the auction in New York City, the Smithsonian National Postal Museum was opening an exhibit on the Klondike Gold Rush of 1899. And I was invited to the opening because of my interest in the museum. And my brother Dave had lent a gold nugget for the exhibit. And so my brother Dave and my son Zach and I all went to Washington. And we went to the Postal Museum, and U.S. Senator Ted Stevens from Alaska was there to cut the ribbon for the opening because the gold rush, took place in Alaska. And Stevenson was a big fan of the Postal Museum. So Stevenson really liked my son Zach, and so he had Zach go up with him and cut the ribbon. And that was like a fun thrill for Zach to be involved. Well, the next day we traveled up to New York to get ready for the stamp auction.